Captain Eli Drake stood motionless on the bridge of the HSS Resolute, his gaze fixed on the vast expanse of stars stretching endlessly before him. The bridge was quiet, save for the faint hum of the ship's systems. The Resolute, a sleek and formidable warship, had been tasked with patrolling the outer boundaries of the Orion sector, a region of space where humanity's reach was still fragile and new. Beyond the ship's reinforced hull lay the Arcturus 7 system, home to fledgling human colonies that clung to survival in the cold void of space. The stars outside shimmered like scattered diamonds, their light reflecting off the Resolute's armor, a silent reminder of the beauty and danger that coexisted in the unknown depths of the galaxy. Eli Drake, a seasoned captain with years of experience, felt the usual calm that came with routine patrols. His crew moved with practiced efficiency, monitoring systems, running diagnostics, and scanning for anomalies. It was just another quiet day in the distant reaches of space, or so it seemed. The silence was broken by Lieutenant Milo Grant, the ship's sensor officer. His voice, usually steady and confident, carried an edge of unease. "Captain," he said, his words hesitant, "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range scanners. Energy signatures, but they're unlike anything I've seen before." Drake's brow furrowed as he strode over to Grant's console. The lieutenant's face was pale, his fingers trembling slightly as they danced across the controls, pulling up the data. The screen displayed a series of readings that defied explanation, patterns of energy that didn't match any known technology or natural phenomenon. They were alien. The captain leaned closer, his sharp eyes scanning the data, his mind racing. The readings were strong, deliberate, and moving. "How many?" Drake asked, his voice calm but firm. Grant hesitated, as if reluctant to answer. 150 ships, he finally said, his voice trembling. "And they're massive, sir. Bigger than anything we've seen before." Drake felt a chill run down his spine. 150 ships. The number alone was staggering, but the implications were even more terrifying. Humanity had dreamed of encountering alien life for centuries, but those dreams had always been tempered by the hope that such encounters would be peaceful. This fleet, however, was heading straight for human space, and its size spoke of something far more ominous. "Combat alert," Drake ordered, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The quiet hum of the bridge was instantly replaced by the sharp wail of alarms. Red lights flashed across the ship, casting eerie shadows on the faces of the crew. The Resolute was alive now, its systems shifting into combat mode, its crew rushing to their stations. Drake stood tall amidst the chaos, his mind focused and clear. He knew the weight of the moment. Humanity had always wondered if it was alone in the universe. Now, that question had been answered. But the answer brought no comfort. Alien life had arrived, and it wasn't coming in peace. As the Resolute prepared for battle, Drake looked out at the stars one last time. Their serene beauty seemed almost mocking now, a cruel contrast to the storm that was about to descend upon them. The captain gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. Whatever was coming, humanity would face it. And Eli Drake would make sure the Resolute stood ready to fight. The void of space seemed to ripple and twist as the alien fleet emerged, their presence tearing through the quiet darkness like a storm. The ships glowed with an eerie, green luminescence that bathed the surrounding space in an unnatural light. They were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, organic in appearance, as though they were living beings rather than mere machines. Their surfaces pulsated rhythmically, like the heartbeat of some colossal creature, each pulse sending faint shivers through the emptiness of the cosmos. Some of the alien vessels were sleek and agile, their forms curving elegantly like predatory beasts ready to strike. Others were vast and imposing, resembling floating cities suspended in the void. Their size alone was enough to inspire dread, but it was their strange, breathing-like movements that made them truly unsettling. To the human eye, they seemed alive, as though they were watching, waiting, and calculating their next move. Admiral Nadia Cross, aboard the HSS Vanguard, stood at the helm of humanity's defense. She was a figure of unwavering resolve, her sharp eyes fixed on the glowing armada that had suddenly appeared on the edge of human space. The Vanguard, along with 9 other human ships, formed a defensive perimeter around the colonies of Arcturus 7. The ships were arranged strategically, their positions carefully chosen to protect the fragile settlements below. Cross had received Captain Drake's urgent report only moments earlier, and now the reality of the situation loomed before her. The alien fleet was massive, far larger than anything humanity could muster. But she knew there was no room for hesitation. The colonies depended on her, and humanity's survival rested on the choices she would make in the coming hours. On the largest alien ship, a monstrous vessel glowing brighter than the rest, Supreme Commander Zarkath observed the human fleet with quiet disdain. He stood tall, his imposing figure cloaked in dark armor that seemed to shimmer with the same green light as his ships. His piercing eyes scanned the human vessels, and a faint smirk tugged at the corners of his mouth. To Zarkath, humanity was nothing but an insignificant nuisance, a primitive race barely worth his attention. The Zelarians, his people, were conquerors, their technology far beyond anything humanity could comprehend. They had subjugated countless civilizations across the galaxy, bending them to their will or erasing them entirely. This was just another conquest, another step in their endless march toward domination. The Zelarians sent their message, a communication that echoed through the human ships like a cold wind. The words were sharp and arrogant, delivered in a tone that left no room for negotiation. "Humans," the voice declared, dripping with contempt, "you are insignificant primitives. Surrender unconditionally, or face annihilation. Resistance will only bring destruction upon you and your kind." The message lingered in the air, its weight pressing down on the crews of the human ships like an invisible force. Fear rippled through the ranks, but Admiral Cross stood unmoved. Her jaw tightened, her fingers gripping the edge of the console as she stared at the alien fleet. She knew what was at stake, but she also knew what humanity was capable of. Her response was swift and unwavering. "If you want a fight," she said, her voice steady and sharp, "we'll give you one." The words carried through her fleet, igniting a spark of determination among her crew. The Vanguard's lights flared brighter as its systems shifted into battle mode. The human ships adjusted their positions, bracing for the confrontation that was now inevitable. On the alien flagship, Zarkath's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. He had expected submission, but instead, humanity had chosen defiance. To him, it was foolishness, a futile attempt to resist the inevitable. But even as he dismissed the humans as weak and insignificant, a faint curiosity lingered in the back of his mind. What would these primitives do when faced with the full might of the Zelarian fleet? The stage was set, the players ready. The green glow of the alien ships intensified, casting long shadows across the human vessels. The stars themselves seemed to dim, as though retreating from the impending clash. The silence of space was heavy, pregnant with the tension of what was to come. And then, like the first crack of thunder before a storm, the battle began. The void erupted into chaos as the Zelarian fleet advanced, their confidence radiating like the green luminescence of their ships. The alien vessels moved with the arrogance of conquerors, firing beams of plasma that carved through the darkness like jagged bolts of lightning. Each blast surged forward with destructive intent, illuminating the battlefield in brief, blinding flashes. But humanity was ready. The human ships, though dwarfed by the alien vessels, moved with a grace and precision that defied the Xelorians' expectations. They darted and twisted through the storm of plasma, their movements almost instinctive, as if the pilots had become one with their ships. The beams of green energy screamed past, missing their marks by mere meters, yet the human vessels remained untouched, their agility proving more than a match for the Xelorian firepower. On the alien flagship, Supreme Commander Zarkath watched the battle unfold with growing frustration. His cold, calculating demeanor began to crack as his fleet struggled to land even a single decisive blow. The humans were smaller, weaker, and less advanced, or so he believed. Yet their ships danced through his attacks as though mocking him, their movements unpredictable and maddeningly precise. Zarkath's tactical advisor, Veclor, stood at his side, his sharp mind analyzing the chaos with increasing unease. The humans were unlike any enemy the Xelorians had faced before. They didn't rely on brute force or overwhelming firepower. Instead, they fought with adaptability and teamwork, their strategies shifting fluidly in response to the Xelorian attacks. Veclor's eyes narrowed as he began to notice patterns in the humans' movements, patterns that revealed a deep understanding of their enemies' weaknesses. "They're exploiting our blind spots," Veclor murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the flagship's systems. "Their tactics, they're not primitive. They're clever." Zarkath's jaw tightened, his pride wounded by the implication. He refused to believe that these insignificant primitives could pose a genuine threat to the might of the Xelorian Empire. Yet the battlefield told a different story. Amidst the chaos, Captain Lena Hart of the destroyer HSS Swiftblade led a daring counterattack that turned the tide of the battle. The Swiftblade was a sleek and nimble vessel, its design emphasizing speed and maneuverability over brute strength. Hart, a fearless and resourceful leader, guided her ship through the heart of the Xelorian fleet, her every move calculated to disrupt the enemy's formation. The Swiftblade darted between alien frigates, weaving through their defenses like a predator stalking its prey. Its plasma cannons fired concentrated bolts of energy, each shot aimed with pinpoint accuracy. The bolts struck the Xelorian frigates' shields, causing them to flicker and weaken. The alien ships trembled under the assault, their organic surfaces pulsating erratically as their defenses faltered. The Xelorians were stunned. They had never encountered an enemy capable of such precision and boldness. The Swiftblade's movements were almost hypnotic, its agility a testament to humanity's ingenuity and determination. Hart's crew worked seamlessly, their coordination flawless as they executed her orders with unwavering trust. Across the battlefield, other human ships followed Hart's example, their actions synchronized as if guided by a single, unspoken command. Destroyers and frigates moved in perfect harmony, protecting each other and coordinating their strikes with surgical precision. When one ship came under fire, another would swoop in to shield it, their teamwork creating an unbreakable web of defense. The Xelorians, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer power, found themselves outmaneuvered and outwitted. Their massive ships, though imposing, were slow and rigid compared to the nimble human vessels. The green plasma beams that had once seemed unstoppable now felt clumsy and ineffective against the humans' swift and unpredictable movements. Zarkath's frustration boiled over as he watched his fleet falter. His fists clenched, his pride screaming for vengeance. "They are insects," he growled, his voice dripping with venom. "Crush them." But Veclor's gaze remained fixed on the battlefield, his mind racing to understand the humans' tactics. He saw something in their movements, something that spoke of resilience, of a deep-rooted determination to survive against impossible odds. It was a quality the Zelarians had long forgotten, blinded by their arrogance and hunger for domination. As the battle raged on, the humans proved that they were more than just insignificant primitives. They were fighters, survivors, and innovators. And in the face of the Zelarian Empire's overwhelming power, they had found their strength not in brute force, but in unity, adaptability, and an unyielding will to protect their own. The clash of cultures had begun, and humanity was far from defeated. The battlefield was a swirling chaos of light and shadow, the void illuminated by bursts of plasma and the flickering shields of alien ships. Amidst the turmoil, Admiral Nadia Cross stood resolute, her mind sharp and focused as she issued the command that would change the course of the battle. "Execute Operation Tempest," she ordered, her voice steady and unwavering. Her fleet sprang into action. The human ships, small and agile compared to the Zelarian behemoths, scattered across the battlefield in a seemingly chaotic pattern. To an untrained eye, it might have appeared as if the humans were retreating or disorganized, but there was purpose behind every movement. The ships darted and weaved, creating a web of confusion that forced the Zelarians to fire blindly into empty space. The alien fleet, accustomed to crushing their enemies with sheer numbers and overwhelming firepower, faltered. Their plasma beams sliced through the void, but more often than not, they found nothing but emptiness. The Zelarian commanders, trained in the art of domination rather than strategy, struggled to adapt to the humans' unpredictable tactics. Admiral Cross watched her plan unfold with a grim sense of satisfaction. The Zelarians were powerful, but they were arrogant, their strength built on the assumption that no enemy could challenge them. Humanity, however, had learned to fight not with brute force, but with ingenuity and resilience. As the Zelarian fleet floundered, the Shadow Hawks, humanity's elite squadron of fighter pilots, launched their attack. Led by Commander Arya Kane, the Hawks were the embodiment of precision and daring. Their ships were small and fast, designed for surgical strikes rather than prolonged combat. Kane's voice crackled through her squadron's comms, calm and commanding. "Focus on their critical systems. Weapons arrays and propulsion units. Leave them stranded and defenseless." The Shadow Hawks descended upon the alien cruisers like a flock of predatory birds, their movements swift and coordinated. Plasma bolts erupted from their ships, each shot aimed with deadly accuracy. They targeted the vulnerable points of the Zelarian vessels, the glowing nodes that powered their weapons, the pulsating veins that drove their propulsion systems. One by one, the alien cruisers began to falter. A plasma cannon exploded in a shower of green light, its energy dissipating into the void. A propulsion unit flickered and died, leaving a cruiser adrift and vulnerable. The Zelarian ships, once symbols of unstoppable power, now seemed clumsy and fragile under the relentless assault of the Shadow Hawks. Commander Kane's ship, sleek and dark like a shadow against the stars, led the charge. Her strikes were precise, each one calculated to deal maximum damage. She moved with a grace that bordered on instinct, her ship weaving through enemy fire as if it were part of her own body. Her squadron followed her lead, their movements synchronized and flawless. The Zelarians were stunned. They had never faced an enemy capable of such precision, such audacity. Their shields flickered and failed, their weapons fell silent, and their massive ships drifted helplessly in the void. On the alien flagship, Supreme Commander Zarkath watched the chaos unfold with disbelief. His fleet, his pride, his empire, all were crumbling before his eyes. The humans, whom he had dismissed as insignificant primitives, were proving to be far more formidable than he had ever imagined. Zarkath's pride as a conqueror was shattered. He had spent centuries subjugating weaker civilizations, bending them to his will with the overwhelming power of the Xelorian fleet. But now, he was faced with an enemy that refused to bow, an enemy that fought not with brute strength, but with cunning and unity. "They are insects," Zarkath growled, his voice trembling with rage. "How can they defy us?" Veclor, his tactical advisor, stood silently beside him, his eyes fixed on the battlefield. He saw what Zarkath could not: the humans' ingenuity, their adaptability, their unyielding determination. It was a force that the Xelorians, for all their power, had never truly understood. As the Shadowhawks continued their assault, the tide of the battle shifted. The Xelorian fleet, once an unstoppable force, now seemed vulnerable and disoriented. Humanity, against all odds, was gaining the upper hand. Admiral Cross watched the alien ships falter, her heart heavy with the weight of the moment. Victory was not yet assured, but for the first time, there was hope. The Xelorians had underestimated humanity, and now, they were paying the price. The turning point had come, and humanity was proving that even in the face of overwhelming power, ingenuity and courage could prevail. The vast emptiness of space was broken only by the looming shadow of a dense asteroid field, its jagged rocks drifting silently like ancient sentinels. Their surfaces glimmered faintly in the starlight, hiding secrets within their cold embrace. Admiral Nadia Cross stood on the bridge of her flagship, her sharp eyes fixed on the tactical display. Her plan was bold, dangerous even, but humanity had no room left for caution. "Signal the fleet," she commanded, her voice calm yet laced with steel. "Begin the retreat." The human ships, battered but unbroken, began to pull back. Their movements were deliberate, almost sluggish, as if they were limping away in defeat. To the Xelorian fleet, it was a sight that stirred a predatory hunger. Supreme Commander Zarkath watched from his flagship, his expression a mix of contempt and triumph. "Fools," he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. "They run like cowards. Press the attack. Finish them." The Xelorian fleet surged forward, their massive ships forming a tight, narrow formation to pursue the retreating humans. The green glow of their plasma weapons cast an eerie light over the battlefield, a stark contrast to the cold darkness of space. Their confidence was palpable, their arrogance blinding them to the danger ahead. As the alien fleet drew closer to the asteroid field, the human ship seemed to vanish into its shadowy depths. The Xelorians hesitated for only a moment before following, their pride demanding they chase their prey to the very end. But hidden within the labyrinth of jagged rocks lay humanity's true strength. 5 additional warships, including the formidable HSS Ironclad, waited in silence, their engines powered down to avoid detection. The Ironclad, a heavy cruiser bristling with weaponry, was commanded by Captain Victor Hayes, a man known for his unshakable resolve and cunning mind. Hayes stood on the bridge of his ship, his gaze fixed on the approaching Xelorian fleet. His hands rested on the console before him, steady and firm. "Wait for it," he murmured, his voice low and measured. The tension in the air was thick, every crew member holding their breath as the alien ships drew closer. The moment came like a spark igniting a powder keg. "Now!" Hayes barked, and the hidden ships sprang to life. Their engines roared, their weapons blazing as they unleashed a torrent of firepower on the unsuspecting Xelorians. The asteroid field erupted into chaos. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked through the void, their impacts lighting up the darkness in bursts of fiery brilliance. The Xelorian ships, caught off guard, reeled under the sudden assault. Their tight formation, once a symbol of strength, became a deadly trap as they collided with each other in their frantic attempts to evade the human attack. The ironclad led the charge, its heavy cannons tearing through the alien ships with devastating precision. Captain Hayes directed his crew with the calm authority of a seasoned warrior, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Target their command vessels. Disrupt their formation. The human ships moved with deadly efficiency, their strikes coordinated and precise. They used the asteroid field to their advantage, weaving between the massive rocks to evade enemy fire. The Xelorians, unused to such tactics, struggled to adapt. Their plasma beams struck the asteroids more often than their targets, sending shards of rock spiraling into the void. On the Xelorian flagship, Supreme Commander Zarkath watched in horror as his fleet descended into disarray. His once proud armada, a symbol of dominance and power, was now a scattered, chaotic mess. Explosions rippled across the battlefield as one Xelorian ship after another succumbed to the relentless human assault. A sudden jolt shook Zarkath's flagship as a barrage of missiles struck its hull. Alarms blared, the ship's organic systems pulsating erratically as they struggled to contain the damage. Zarkath gripped the edge of his command console, his claws digging into the metal. "How is this possible?" he snarled, his voice a mix of rage and disbelief. "They are nothing but primitives." But the truth was undeniable. The humans had outmaneuvered him, their ingenuity and adaptability turning the tide of the battle. The Xelorian fleet's centralized command structure, once a source of strength, now became its greatest weakness. With Zarkath's flagship crippled, his commanders were left without direction. Individual ships, isolated and vulnerable, floundered as they tried to make sense of the chaos. Admiral Cross watched the battle unfold from her position on the edge of the asteroid field. Her expression was one of grim determination, her heart heavy with the weight of the lives at stake. She knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time, victory felt within reach. The Xelorians, so accustomed to crushing their enemies with overwhelming force, were now on the defensive. Their arrogance had blinded them to the humans' resilience, their belief in their own superiority leading them into a trap from which there was no escape. As the battle raged on, the asteroid field became a graveyard of shattered ships and drifting debris. But amidst the destruction, humanity's spirit burned bright, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. The battlefield was a canvas of chaos and destruction, painted with the fiery streaks of plasma and the smoldering remains of shattered ships. Yet amidst the storm, humanity's resolve burned brighter than ever. The Xelorians, once a seemingly invincible force, now faltered, their cohesion unraveling like threads pulled from a worn tapestry. Admiral Nadia Cross stood tall on the bridge of the Vanguard, her eyes sharp and unyielding as they scanned the tactical display. Every movement of her fleet was deliberate, every order a calculated step toward victory. Around her, the crew worked with quiet determination, their faces reflecting the weight of the moment. "Focus fire on their command vessels," Cross ordered, her voice steady yet commanding. "Cut off their ability to coordinate." Beside her, Commander Darius Quinn, her tactical officer, leaned over his console, his keen mind piecing together the puzzle of the Xelorian fleet's movements. His dark eyes flickered with understanding as he spoke. "They're crumbling without centralized command," he said, his voice low but firm. "Their ships are acting independently, like severed limbs. If we keep the pressure on their flagship, the rest will fall apart." Cross nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Then we don't give them a chance to recover. Relay the orders, tight formations, coordinated strikes. We fight as one." Humanity's greatest strength was not in their ships or weapons, but in their unity. While the Zelarians fought as isolated units, each ship acting on its own, the humans moved as a single entity. Their fleet was a symphony of purpose, every vessel playing its part in a grand design. At the forefront of the battle, Captain Eli Drake commanded the Resolute, a sleek and agile frigate. His ship darted through the chaos like a predator, its movements precise and calculated. Drake's voice rang out over the comms, steady and confident. "Bring us around to their starboard side," he ordered, his eyes locked on one of the largest Zelarian dreadnoughts. The alien ship loomed ahead, a hulking behemoth bristling with weapons that could obliterate entire fleets. But Drake saw not an unstoppable force, but a vulnerable target. The Resolute moved with breathtaking speed, weaving through enemy fire as it closed the distance. The dreadnought's plasma cannons roared, their green light searing through the void, but the human ship was too fast, too agile. "Target their primary weapons array," Drake commanded, his voice unwavering. "Disable it before they can fire again." The Resolute's cannons blazed, their shots striking the dreadnought with pinpoint accuracy. Explosions rippled across the alien ship's surface, its massive plasma cannons falling silent as their power nodes were destroyed. The dreadnought, once a symbol of Zelarian dominance, was left crippled and vulnerable. On the vanguard, Admiral Cross watched the Resolute's daring strike with a mixture of pride and determination. "Well done, Captain Drake," she murmured under her breath, before turning her attention back to the larger battle. The Zelarian fleet, once a unified force of destruction, was now a scattered collection of isolated ships. Without the guidance of their flagship, their movements were erratic, their attacks uncoordinated. The humans exploited this weakness with ruthless efficiency, their ships working together to dismantle the alien fleet piece by piece. Despite their losses, the human fleet fought with unyielding resolve. Every ship, every crew member, was driven by the same purpose: survival. They fought not just for themselves, but for each other, their unity a beacon of hope in the darkness. Admiral Cross's voice rang out across the comms, a rallying cry that echoed through every ship in the fleet. "We are not fighting for glory or conquest. We are fighting for our people, for our future. Stand together, and we will prevail." Her words ignited a fire in the hearts of her crew, their determination hardening into steel. The humans pressed their advantage, their strikes precise and devastating. One by one, the Zelarian ships fell, their once mighty fleet reduced to smoldering wreckage. On the Zelarian flagship, Supreme Commander Zarkatha's rage boiled over as his empire crumbled around him. His claws raked across the console, sparks flying as he snarled in frustration. "They are insects," he roared, his voice echoing through the silent bridge. "How can they defy us?" But the answer was clear. The human strength lay not in their technology or their firepower, but in their unity, their ability to adapt and fight as one. Where the Zelarians relied on brute force and centralized control, the humans thrived on collaboration and ingenuity. As the battle reached its climax, the Zelarian fleet was left in ruins. The vanguard led the final charge, its cannons blazing as it struck the killing blow against the alien flagship. The massive ship shuddered, explosions ripping through its hull as it was consumed by flames. The silence that followed was deafening, the battlefield eerily still as the last remnants of the Zelarian fleet drifted into the void. Humanity, against all odds, had emerged victorious. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the vanguard, her gaze fixed on the wreckage of the alien fleet. Her expression was one of quiet resolve, her heart heavy with the cost of their victory. But she knew that this moment would be remembered not as a triumph of power, but as a testament to humanity's strength, their unity, and their unbreakable will to survive. The battlefield hung in a haunting silence, broken only by the faint hum of damaged ships and the occasional crackle of debris colliding in the void. The once mighty Zelarian fleet was scattered, its vessels reduced to smoldering wreckage drifting aimlessly. Supreme Commander Zarkath, aboard his crippled flagship, stood amidst the flickering lights of his shattered command chamber. His claws rested heavily on the console, his once indomitable presence now shadowed by the weight of defeat. The air within the flagship was thick with the acrid stench of burnt circuitry and the faint metallic tang of blood. Alien crew members, injured and disoriented, moved sluggishly through the wreckage, their glowing eyes dimmed by despair. Zarkath's gaze swept over the ruin of his empire, his pride clawing at him like a beast desperate to escape its cage. A message came through a transmission from the Vanguard. Admiral Nadia Cross appeared on the screen, her expression calm but resolute. Her uniform bore the marks of battle, yet her posture was unyielding, her presence commanding. "Supreme Commander Zarkath," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Your fleet is defeated. You have fought with honor, but this battle is over. I offer you terms of surrender. Accept them, and we will provide medical aid to your wounded. Resist, and we will finish what we started." Her words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Zarkath's claws tightened against the console, his pride roaring in protest. To surrender was unthinkable, a humiliation that would stain his legacy forever. Yet the reality of his situation was undeniable. His flagship was crippled, his fleet in ruins, and his people suffering. He turned away from the screen, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. The Zelarian culture was built on dominance, on the belief that mercy was a weakness. Yet here were the humans, offering aid to their enemies, an act so alien it felt almost incomprehensible. Minutes passed in tense silence, the weight of the decision pressing down on Zarkath like a crushing tide. Finally, he turned back to the screen, his voice low and strained. "I yield," he said, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "Your tactics have proven superior. I will accept your terms." Aboard the Vanguard, the crew let out a collective breath of relief, the tension that had gripped them finally easing. Admiral Cross nodded, her expression softening slightly. "You've made the right choice, Commander. Prepare to receive our medical teams." Among those teams was Dr. Elena Ruiz, the Vanguard's chief medical officer. A woman of quiet strength and unwavering compassion, Ruiz prepared her team for the mission ahead. The medical bay buzzed with activity as supplies were gathered and personnel briefed. Ruiz stood at the center, her dark eyes reflecting both determination and empathy. "We're not here as soldiers," she reminded her team. "We're here as healers. Treat their wounded with the same care you would our own. Show them what humanity is truly capable of." The humanitarian mission aboard the Zelarian flagship was a scene of stark contrasts. The humans, clad in medical uniforms, moved through the alien corridors with purpose, their voices calm and reassuring. The Zelarians, stunned by the humans' mercy, watched in silence, their expressions a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Ruiz herself tended to the most severely injured, her hands steady as she worked to stabilize an alien officer whose breathing was labored. The officer's glowing eyes flickered weakly as he stared at her, his voice barely a whisper. "Why do you help us?" he asked, his tone filled with both curiosity and mistrust. Ruiz paused, her gaze meeting his. "Because suffering knows no boundaries," she said simply. "And because mercy is not weakness, it's strength." Her words seemed to linger in the air, their meaning sinking into the minds of the Zelarians around her. For a people who had never known compassion, the humans' actions were a revelation, a glimpse into a world beyond the rigid confines of their militaristic culture. Meanwhile, Zarkath prepared to meet Admiral Cross face to face. The alien commander carried himself with a quiet dignity, his pride bruised but not broken. He entered the Vanguard's conference chamber, its polished walls gleaming under the soft light. Cross awaited him, her posture poised and composed. The two leaders faced each other, their gazes locked in a silent exchange. Zarkath spoke first, his voice measured but heavy with the weight of his words. "You have defeated me," he said, his tone devoid of malice. "Not with strength, but with cunning. Your people, they are unlike any I have encountered." Cross inclined her head slightly, her expression thoughtful. "We fight not for conquest, but for survival. And we believe that even in war, there is room for humanity." Zarkath studied her for a moment, his glowing eyes narrowing. Then, as if compelled by some unseen force, he began to speak. "There are others," he said, his voice low and grave. "Other empires, far more dangerous than my own. They will see your victory here as a threat. They will come for you." Cross's expression hardened, her mind racing as she absorbed his words. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice firm but calm. And so Zarkath revealed what he knew: names of alien empires, descriptions of their ships and tactics, whispers of their ambitions. His words painted a picture of a galaxy teeming with danger, a vast expanse where humanity's survival would depend not on strength alone, but on unity, intelligence, and the ability to adapt. As the meeting ended, Cross felt a weight settle on her shoulders, a burden not of despair, but of purpose. The battle against the Zelarians was over, but the war for humanity's future had only just begun. And amidst the wreckage of the battlefield, a fragile thread of understanding began to form, a quiet acknowledgement that even enemies could find common ground in the face of greater threats. The battlefield, once a chaotic storm of fire and destruction, now lay eerily quiet. The remnants of the Zelarian fleet drifted like ghosts through the void, their once mighty vessels reduced to broken shells. But it was not the silence of death, it was the silence of transformation, the calm after a storm that had reshaped the galaxy. Supreme Commander Zarkath stood aboard a smaller Zelarian vessel, watching as his flagship was towed away for repairs. His eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, reflected not anger but contemplation. The humans had defeated him, but more than that, they had shown him something his people had never understood: the power of unity, the strength found in mercy. As Zarkath prepared to return to the Zelarian Empire, he carried with him a message, one that burned in his mind like a brand: humans are not to be underestimated. His claws tapped against the smooth surface of the console as he replayed the battle in his thoughts, marveling at the ingenuity and resilience of a species he had once dismissed as insignificant. The Zelarian crew aboard his ship remained silent, their pride bruised and their trust shaken. They had seen their enemies offer aid to their wounded, had felt the touch of human compassion, a concept so foreign it bordered on alien. Zarkath knew that his empire would not easily accept the truth, but he would deliver it nonetheless. Back aboard the Vanguard, Admiral Nadia Cross sat in her quarters, writing her report to Earth Command. Her fingers moved steadily across the console, her mind focused despite the exhaustion that weighed on her. The words she wrote carried the weight of the future. Asterisk: the Zelarian threat has been neutralized, but we must not grow complacent. There are other civilizations out there, far more dangerous than the Zelarians. This battle has proven our strength, but it has also revealed our vulnerability. We must prepare for what lies ahead. Asterisk. Her report was sent, a warning to Earth and a call to action. Humanity could celebrate its victory, but the galaxy was vast, and its dangers were many. Cross knew that this was only the beginning. In the years that followed, humanity transformed. The lessons of the Battle of Arcturus 7 became the foundation of a new era. Fleets were expanded, tactics refined, alliances forged. The name Arcturus 7 became legendary, its story told in classrooms and council chambers, a beacon of what humanity could achieve when united. The galaxy watched with wary eyes. The Zelarian Empire, once an unstoppable force, now tread carefully, their arrogance tempered by the memory of their defeat. Other alien civilizations, hearing of the humans' victory, began to take notice. Some saw them as a threat, others as potential allies, but none dared to underestimate them. The Battle of Arcturus 7 became a defining moment in human history. It was not just a victory, it was a testament to humanity's ingenuity, resilience, and refusal to surrender, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The galaxy learned a powerful lesson: humans never give up. The victory over the Zelarians was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far greater, the dawn of humanity's ascension as a galactic power. The stars, once distant and unreachable, now seemed closer, their light a promise of new challenges and new possibilities. Earth, the cradle of humanity, became the heart of a growing empire. From its surface, ships launched into the unknown, carrying explorers, diplomats, and warriors to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Each vessel bore the legacy of Arcturus 7, a legacy of courage, unity, and the refusal to accept defeat. Admiral Cross, now a revered figure in human history, continued to lead with the same determination that had won the battle. She became a symbol of humanity's strength, her name spoken with respect and admiration across the stars. Supreme Commander Zarkath, back in his empire, found himself changed. He spoke of the humans not with disdain, but with a grudging respect. His people listened, their militaristic pride shaken by his words. Slowly, the Zelarian Empire began to shift, their rigid beliefs challenged by the memory of human mercy. As humanity expanded into the galaxy, they encountered new civilizations, some hostile, others curious, and a few willing to join them in the pursuit of peace. The stars became a tapestry of alliances and conflicts, each thread woven with the legacy of Arcturus 7. The name Terra echoed across the cosmos, whispered in council chambers and battlefields alike. It was a name that carried weight, a name that symbolized resilience, ingenuity, and the unyielding spirit of a species that refused to be conquered. And so, humanity's journey into the stars truly began. They carried with them the lessons of their past, the strength of their unity, and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. The galaxy would never forget the day humans proved their worth not just as warriors, but as survivors, dreamers, and builders of a brighter future. The stars, vast and eternal, bore witness to humanity's rise. And in their light, the legacy of Arcturus 7 burned brightly, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could prevail. The age of human expansion had begun, and the stars would never forget the name Terra.